Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, then, we're rocking and rolling. Hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba.
Alright,
yeah. Welcome to the Armist Inquisition, episode 243 on Sunday, the 14th of August, 2022. I'm Amish Phil.
I'm Amish Ben.
And I'm Amish Matt.
And tonight we are joined by paranormal researcher, author, and soon-to-be podcaster, Mark Anthony Wyatt. How are we doing, Mark? Nice to see you again.
Hi, Phil. Very well, thank you. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Hi, Ben.
Hey.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute since we stalked, since we talked to you. Since we talked to you last, yeah. What was it?
Yeah.
It must have been a good year ago, at least.
I thought it was more than that. Like
Could
18
well be.
months plus. Could be, yeah.
Could well be. Mark, you've written 2 books that I'm a fan of about Cornwall and its paranormal uniqueness. The Spirit of Cornwall, Volume 1. There it is. In your camera.
My camera.
And Spirit of Cornwall, Volume 2.
Oh, no,
Other way round, Ben.
Well,
Oh my God, rank amateurs. That's what I'm dealing with. There you go.
I could see it.
Terrible. I really enjoy your books. Very easy to read and quite unique because, you know, each book focuses on a different end of Cornwall, if you like, doesn't it? And what's unique about these places.
yes.
And I just found it really interesting. It kind of made me want to retire there, reading the books. You really bring out the charm of the place.
Right. Was it you that gave me a review recently? Because somebody used very similar words to that.
Who, me?
He wanted to retire. Yeah, it could well have been. Yeah, I read that on a review just a few days ago, and I occasionally go on Amazon just to have a look, and there was a fresh one, and they used very similar description. So I've sussed you. Thank you very much. If it was you, thank you very much.
It's more evidence of a hive mind, I think.
Yeah, maybe that's a synchronicity.
Could be.
Yeah.
Okay. Now then, paranormal research. Hang on. I think we've got something coming in. Is incoming transmission incoming. What's going on? Stand by.
Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird. She warbles as she flies, but she never hollers cuckoo until the 4th day of July. Jack of diamonds, you're the meanest heart I know. Well, you up my poor pockets, my silver and gold. I'm going up on a mountain, gonna build me a whiskey still, and I'll sell you 1 bottle for a $20 bill. Going up on a mountain, gonna stand there looking down, so I can see my pretty baby whenever she comes around. Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird. She warbles as she flies, and she never hollers cuckoo until the 4th day of July. Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird.
This voice sounds familiar, I have to say.
Yeah.
Certified folk banger.
No, yeah. You wouldn't have anything to do with this, Mark, would you?
I might do.
What's going on? Where did this emergency transmission come from?
Okay. The background to that is where to start. So I'm setting up a podcast soon. I've been planning this for a while and been delayed mostly by technical stuff because I'm a dunce when it comes to technical stuff. And I've got all great guests lined up. I've got lots of fantastic topics, and I've got no shortage of those. But the technical stuff is taking me a bit longer. So, where did Cuckoo, the whole idea of Cuckoo? It's going to be called the Cuckoo Town Podcast, and it comes from two sources. The sort of more serious one is one of the areas that I've sort of expanded into. Can you still hear me? I'm probably just rambling to myself. One of the reasons, so I've been fascinated by this sort of arts and music and literature scene. In particular in Cornwall. And in the past, I'm talking, well, there's a lot of it from the 1890s up to the 1960s, really. But this particular, there was a guy, he was a multi-talented guy called, I can't say this very clearly, Sven, that's S-V-E-N, Sven Berlin, as in the German city.
Yeah.
He's a guy that I'm sort of fascinated with, one of quite a few I've been reading a lot about. He's passed now, but he was a sculptor. That was his main thing. He was also a writer. He did poetry. He was probably, I can't remember now. He did a lot of different things. So I'm put on the spot and I'm trying to remember it all. Now, he wrote a book. He was part of this very small community that were in St. Ives in Cornwall during the sort of post-war years and sort of onwards from sort of late 40s, 50s. They were the sort of the top. It was like a thriving artistic community.
Really? Right.
And it's a very small town down there. If anyone's been there, they'll know it's a very small town. And there was all this creativity just buzzing around the place. I mean, great musicians, artists, literature, everything was down there. And he was one of the major characters. And he sort of, it's a long story, but he sort of fell out with these other artists, and he went off to Dorset in England, sort of like, I don't know, a couple of 100 miles away or something, and to live the life of a gypsy. And when he was there, he wrote this book about his days in St. Ives, which he called The Dark Monarch. And basically it was, I'm not sure how you say this. Is it Romana Clef? It's like a story based on real people where very little care has been taken in changing the names, although he did change names, and he did change the name of the town and so on. So this is getting back to the point of it is he changed the name from St. Ives to Cuckoo Town,
right?
Because it was like his little dig at all these crazy artistic types,
right?
Of which he was one. He was one of them, and he's so that partly comes from that. He'd called this place Cuckoo Town, and I just love that sound of Cuckoo Town. It's sort of slightly crazy,
yeah. Subversive.
And I'd already got a name for my podcast before this sort of came to my mind. Really, I was going to call it the Magical Realms because it was to do with where the weird stuff. It's like the fringes of our culture. You've got all this sort of slightly weird stuff, the UFOs, the ghosts and everything, which is, it's like just a minority of us that are really interested in this stuff. But then you've also got all the creative people, the artists, the writers and so on. And there's like a cross-fertilization between them as well. And you'll find that the more creative a person is, this has been sort of proven, the more creative somebody is in writing music or whatever they do, the more likely they are to have a sort of quote paranormal experience.
Wow.
So there's a sort of, as I say, cross-fertilization between these two fields. So that's where the sort of magical realms, the whole idea that that there's this unseen realm where we get our ideas from when we're sort of we have these brain waves, these sudden brain waves, and so on. The guy I've just been talking about, I think he called it the magic shuttle, which is, it's like the spark that creates, it's the creative spark, the energy that sets us off. And without that, I mean, it's the story of life. It's everything. Literally everything comes from this other field.
Yeah, how do you build a table without imagining it first?
Exactly. So we all do it in our own ways. Everyone does it. So that's the sort of spark of creativity. So that's where my podcast is going. It's going to look, or try to look, more at the sort of more creative aspects of paranormal, where it meets. So you've got like strange fiction or weird fiction, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this stuff has been, weird fiction has been around for, well, forever, really. But you could go back to like the 1880s, 1890s. You could go back to like, H.G. Wells and all these different people. And they wrote weird fiction. And it's on the same sort of field as the paranormal stuff. A lot of their ideas come from that. And if you read a lot of these old books by people like Algernon Blackwood, Arthur Machen, these sort of people, and H.G. Wells, all of them, I mean, you can see there's like a strong sort of theme of like the paranormal, the weird, a strong theme of the weird in there. So you can see where the two sort of meet. They sort of merge and blend. And it's sort of on the fringes of the mainstream, because you don't really get it in the mainstream so much. It's, by the time it gets to the mainstream, it's more obvious. It's not so dark and creepy,
Well, even like Arthur C. Clarke, and like the monolith. Yeah. I mean, where does that idea come from, that you can have this giant black sort of perfect square, perfect surface thing be the sort of the driving force of human evolution? I mean, that is weird. It's a weird concept that has to come from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, the other part of the cuckoo, I should tell you before I forget. So you've got that Cuckoo Town idea, and I just love the sound of it. That it's almost like you don't have to know Cornwall, you don't have to know St. Ives. It isn't St. Ives itself the way I'm using it. I'm just using it as like a metaphor, just like some sort of symbol of where I'm going with this podcast. It's like it's just an idea, an imaginary town, if you like. Now, I was toying with the idea, and I was thinking, well, Cuckoo Town to me sounds better than Magical Realms. I mean, just does to me. And I'd already sort of worked out all these little blurby bits and PR and artwork and stuff for Magical Realms. And then I sort of started having second thoughts about the name. And then I wasn't quite sure. And then I was visiting a small town in America, which I want to talk about later because it's fascinating stuff. And it's a place where there was a massive UFO sighting in 2000, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a minute, if you like. And
definitely.
We had only gone there because we'd been there before. I'll say where it was. It was a place called Lebanon in Illinois. It's roughly 90 minutes away from where we are. And we knew there'd been a UFO sighting, and we loved the town. It's a beautiful little town, very old town, very quiet. Hardly anyone lives there, really. And we just went down there so we could pop into a few shops that we really liked. There's a really cool music shop, which also doubles as a UFO type place. It's got aliens and UFOs hanging from the ceiling, and so he's sort of selling plectrums and guitar strings, but he's also sort of talking ufology, and he's very, very knowledgeable, this guy. And so we were heading down to see him, but we popped into this other shop just along from him, and it's difficult to explain this to some if you don't live in this country, but I've been here a while now, as you know, and they're very friendly people. Americans generally very friendly people. They're not all friendly, obviously, but most of them are. And you go into a store and you start talking to someone. Before you know it, there'll be 5 or 6 people joining in the conversation, and you'll be there for an hour. Yeah. It is like that. So my Janice, she wandered off and got these lads who were running this store. They're probably my age, so old lads.
39.
Oh yeah, thank you, Phil. Yeah, yeah. So I could hear her from a sort of, I don't know how far away, quite a distance, the other end of the store, talking about UFOs and ghosts to these local people, which is why I'd gone there. But I don't know if you use the term doorstepped. Do you know when somebody beards you? When somebody beards you. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know beards. What's beards you?
Well, beards you, it's an expression. It means it's like when somebody sort of inflicts themselves on you, and they stand really close to you and they start talking at you.
Right.
Like they're trying to be friendly. They are being friendly, but they're sort of they want your attention and they want to talk at you rather than with you, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I was in the store, and I'm obviously not going to give any names, but some stranger who I think he was a bit on the what do they call it, on the scale?
Spectrum?
Yeah, on the spectrum. Yeah, I think so. He just suddenly popped out from behind a rack in the store and started bearding me. And he started talking about Led Zeppelin, and he just went on and on and on and on about Led Zeppelin, very loud in my face. And I'm listening to this conversation, a more interesting conversation. I mean, I like Led Zeppelin, but I didn't go there to talk about them. And I can hear this conversation going on. So I managed to eventually escape him and went and listened to these other guys talking about the UFO, a sighting that this guy had, which was fascinating, like a weird cryptid. And this was the owner of a business, 60-plus-year-old guy, ex-military. And he had some wonderful stories to tell, which I'm going to follow up.
Whoa, you just skipped off a weird cryptid, man.
Oh yeah.
Is flannel involved, or dog man, or
sort of horsey actually,
moth cells?
More like a horse.
Oh, horse.
Centaur.
Yeah, more like a horse. Yeah. It's very, very strange. Very strange.
The Mars is very bright tonight.
Let me just tell you the cuckoo bit, and then I can get away from it. So this guy that had doorstepped me, bearded me, however you want to put it, I sort of made my escape to the counter where this more interesting conversation was going on, which I wanted to listen to. And he followed me. He wasn't content with me, I tried to do it not in a rude way, but he followed me, and he tried to continue this conversation. And he didn't like it because we were all talking UFOs, ghosts, and cryptids and so on, having a great time. There must have been about 6 of us. And he chased after me, more or less. And he started on about Robert Plant and how many times he'd seen him and blah, 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 blah. And oh, my God.
I mean, he could at least talk about Jimmy Page and Aleister Crowley, couldn't he?
Yeah, exactly. He wouldn't have known about that. He wouldn't have known about Boleskine and all that stuff. So anyway, the rest of the guys who were there, like I think there were 3 other guys, and there was Janice, who's really into this weird stuff as well. And we're having this conversation, and he got quite visibly upset that we were talking about this stuff because in his mind, none of this stuff was real. You're crazy. So he actually said to us, he actually came out with this thing. Like, why do I want to talk about ghosts and UFOs? He said, I'm not cuckoo. He said, I'm not cuckoo. And it was something I'd never heard before. Like, he was implying, I don't think he, as I said, I don't think he wasn't all there really.
So it was cuckoo.
So he thought we were all cuckoo because we were talking about this stuff that clearly doesn't exist in his world. And we must be crazy. And why wouldn't we want to talk about Led Zeppelin when we could talk about, whatever? So it just struck me as really funny at the time. And it was the way he said it. It was like, I'm not cuckoo. And then I started thinking about Cuckoo Town, and so you can see where that, it was like something was trying to tell me, call it Cuckoo Town because you're all cuckoo.
Like a flash of inspiration.
Exactly.
It was exactly. So we're sort of like, going back on itself, hasn't it, really? So that's where the idea comes from. It's a very long way of telling a very short story, but it's difficult to explain the guy because he was... and unfortunately, somebody gave him my number. I'm not saying who, but somebody gave him my number.
The Led Zeppelin guy's got your number?
Yeah. And he rang me on the Monday. And I'm just ignoring my phone because I knew where, oh my God.
Well, this might surprise you, Mark, but guess who we've got on line one? Hello, Led Zeppelin nuts.
Oh dear. I don't think
surprise.
I don't think he'll ever see this because he's not into the stuff.
Oh, no one's seen it anyway.
I know we have quite a wide reach.
Really, it's not on his radar. It's not on his personal radar.
We'll put some Robert Plant hashtags in the show notes. So you can pick him up.
So, oh God. So what else were you doing in this town? What's it called? Lebanon?
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, okay, I'll try and be more serious now. So
don't be serious. We're not serious.
Okay. When we arrived, it was a red hot day. I think it was like late 90s that day, which is quite normal around here throughout like a couple of months. And we just went and parked the car in this very small, very quiet town. We'd been there a few times before, but we just wanted to park the car and wander down to see two or three different people we knew. And as we were parking, I noticed this house. Did you actually have you got that picture handy? I don't know if you have. But it doesn't matter if you have.
Keep talking.
So anyway, I saw this wonderful house, this absolutely staggeringly sort of creepy looking house. It was in good condition, but it was the typical sort of house that we used to see on these Hollywood type films, these horror films. I'm trying to think of an example. Like on a hill, and it's like the only thing I took the photo immediately. Well, actually, Janice did because I didn't have my camera. And I said the only thing missing is like the lightning flash top right. You can imagine that on a dark night with the dark clouds and so on. Very creepy. So I didn't know anything about this house. I'd never really noticed it before, weirdly enough, because I hadn't. I'd only been there a couple of times. And we just carried on. I took the picture and then we just carried on with our day. When we were in this music stroke UFO type shop.
Sorry, Ben.
I'll say the name of it is Hangar 18, which you'll probably get the significance of.
Is that from Area 51?
Yeah, well, Wright Patterson, Ohio. It was one of these hangars where they supposedly had all these UFOs and stuff. So we mentioned this house and we said, oh, what a beautiful house it was. And he said, oh, I know the people who live there. And because it's a very small town, everyone seems to know everyone. And cutting a long story short, I had a phone call from them yesterday saying, we understand you're interested in the house because it's haunted. Now, I forgot to mention that bit. Terrible storyteller. So when Janice took the picture, I did say to her, if that house isn't haunted, it bloody well should be, because it's so creepy looking, And then, of course, we find out it is haunted. Like half an hour later, we speak to this guy and he goes, oh, yeah, I know the people who live there and it is haunted. So that's setting in motion a chain of events. So I'm speaking to them later tonight to arrange a meeting to go over there. And I'm not really a ghost hunter, to be honest. I'm not. That's not what I do. But I am interested and I have seen stuff myself. So I know it's, real, whatever that is. I've seen stuff. So I'm fascinated by it. And I have contacts who love doing that stuff. And they're very good at it, very professional. So I'm just like a go-between. I'm just going to find out about the place. I'm going to make a lot of notes about the sort of things they've experienced, any names that might come up, this sort of thing. And then I'm going to keep that to myself and send, well, a colleague I know to go and have a look, because I'm curious to see whether he comes up with any information I get.
Right, if he can independently verify.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the things I've got sort of lined up for the next few days, really. The other thing was, of course, this town has a history of this weird stuff. Because there was a huge UFO back in 2000.
Tell us about that, Mark.
Well, I don't know that much. I know a little bit about it. I'm sort of on the sort of learning curve with that one, because I need to go and interview these guys without the presence of this Led Zeppelin guy around them.
Yeah.
You know, because I won't be able to talk to them like I wasn't able to, because he just kept getting in the way. I think he was just randomly passing by, so hopefully that won't happen again. But I'm in touch with these people now, and we'll have a proper sit down and, you know, I record them.
Right.
But
So
all I know so far is that, I mean, I had heard of it before I ever went there. It was quite a big case. So I think it was early January 2000. At least 3 police officers from various towns on a flight route, you know, I'm trying to think, southeast of St. Louis, this place is. It was tracked, like pretty low and huge, traveling across these 3 towns. It was, from memory, it was Belleville. Oh dear, what were the names? I've got them. So I scribbled them down because I'm still in the early stages of learning about this myself. Yeah. It was V-shaped, and it was the size of a football field, apparently, or a 2-story house. Somebody else said it was like a 2-story house. It was silent, no visible engines, and 3 separate police officers in 3 different areas along the route. All of these were southeast of St. Louis. They all saw it, and they all reported it to their police stations. Oh. Also, some truckers saw it, and various other people.
Was this in daytime or nighttime?
This was a nighttime sighting.
So it was the lights that were going off.
Yeah,
I guess.
It was light. Yeah, and they claimed it was like 2 stories. It was almost like there was a penthouse on top. One guy said. And there is an Air Force base quite nearby.
That was going to be my next question.
Yes. Scott Air Force Base is quite nearby, a few miles away, I think. So they claimed it was nothing to do with them. They didn't have anything up in the air at the time. And, you know, they probably did know about it, but they couldn't admit to it. What else can I tell you about it? So it was tracked. The interesting thing there, I think, is that 3 policemen that all saw it and all reported it, and they all reported the same thing from different areas. And one of the policemen actually made some quite funny remark, you know, like, well, I think, yeah, a trucker rang in the report and to the police station, and the lady at the police station told this local policeman who was out on a patrol, you know, there's a UFO, apparently, you just keep your eyes up and have a look. And he said, well, what do you expect me to do about it? You know, what can I do about it? Take him in for questioning, you know. So so it's quite an interesting case anyway. And one of the guys I was chatting to in this store, who I want to get the full-on story, he had some wonderful information, which I need more information on, really. But he's linked sort of at a distance to the Rendlesham Forest incident, which happened, as you probably know, in Suffolk in England, 1980, December 80. He wasn't there. As you know, it's a US Air Force base. Well, it was a RAF base, Bentwaters, which the US Air Force used at the time. But back home in America, at the same time, and this has never, as far as I know, this part of that story has never ever come out. He was at an Air Force or Coast Guard base in America. I can't really say too much more, but he was in a radio room at the same time as the Rendlesham incident was going on.
Oh.
And he was receiving, not just him, obviously there's a bunch of them, I'm sure. They were receiving reports from England, from that base, and they were all talking about this incident that was going off at the time. And there were rumours and stuff going around as well, you know, people's different stories going around as to what had happened. So he's one of the guys I'm going to interview this week. Hopefully, if I can sort of get
that's like a 2-for-1.
Yeah, a twofer.
Yeah, a twofer.
It's a twofer, yeah. And a 3-for-1 actually, because the same guy.
So the horseman, the cryptid.
He did. Yeah. Now I'm wondering.
Really?
Is it connected? I mean, I think when people see these things, it's like it's not always it's not the be all and end all. It's an ongoing thing. Maybe it opens up some
portal
perception or something. You know. But he something ran. I'm going to get the full story from him, but because as I say, I was trying to listen hard to what he had to say, and this other guy kept interrupting because it was a public space, you know. But he saw something run across the road in front of him as he was driving, and he said it was like a long horse, but like a skinny boat, like a bony horse. So what that was, we don't know. That wasn't at the same time, I should stress. That wasn't at the same time. That was like later.
No, so that sort of suggests like
a hot spot.
Well, either a hot spot or a propensity in the individual.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I think it's a blend. I think it's a blend of both, really. I think some people are more, what's the word, really? Lightly
sensitive
to it. Yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff myself in the past, not so much in recent years, but and I wonder whether that's part of your sort of consciousness growing or whatever. It's something. Maybe it happens more when you're younger as well. In some cases.
Well, we had that with the chap from I can't remember the name of the house where you investigated recently, and we had him on the show, Mark.
Yes, yeah. That's
what's it called?
Robin Terry.
Robin, yeah. But he was telling us about the 8-year-old girl who seemed to have been communicating with the girl who died in the fire and stuff, and it was like. And this is something I've read in like philosophy and all sorts of stuff, that when you start off, you start off at a certain level, and this stuff just gets drummed out of you by the time you reach puberty, basically. It's like imaginary friends. You know, we all remember people we knew who had imaginary friends. It's like, were they? Or did they just have some sort of filter, wonky in their brain where they could see something that we couldn't? I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder whether... I mean, it's also tied in with the possibility, some would say the reality, I don't know, of reincarnation. So if a soul enters a body at whenever, conception or whenever it does, maybe there's the whole sort of pregnancy period is a kind of buffer so that, you sort of learn to live again. You're sort of learning to cope with this new situation you're in.
The suffering.
Yeah. And then also as you're a youngster, the early years, you can't really express yourself anyway. And I think the ones who talk about their past lives and so on, it's almost like a glitch in that for some reason the memory banks weren't wiped or something of previous. If that's the case, I don't know. I mean, none of us really know.
Yeah, we're speculating.
But yeah. So that's a possibility. I mean, I myself, when I was a kid, I used to regularly have a dream. It's like a very real dream, where I used to get upset in bed. I'm talking about like very young, sort of 4, 5, 6, whatever. And I used to say to my mum, when she used to come in to sort of try and calm me down, she would say, what's about? And I would say, I want to go back on the farm where Tracy is. Now, I don't know what that meant because I can't remember what the dream was, but it was always the same line. And my mum, because I had a sister I still have a sister called Tracy, and she was in the same room at the time because I was brought up in a council house. It's like a shoebox, and only in retrospect, at the time it seemed big, but and she was in the same room, and my mum would say to me, "What are you talking about? Tracy's over there. She was sleeping until you started yelling, And I'd say, "No, not that Tracy, the other Tracy." But we didn't know any other Tracys. So I wonder whether that was some sort of flashback to something else. It's all a mystery.
So can you remember it? Because, I think my earliest memory is probably from about the age of 4 or 5. It's weird that we don't remember, unless, I guess, in exceptional circumstances, we really tend to not remember anything from around that age, previous to that age, do we?
No, that's right. I mean, I've only got, I don't know. You speak to some people and they remember, they can go back to like 2 or 3, can't they? My earliest memory was probably, that was just a dream that I had, regularly. But in the reality, my first memory was going across I wouldn't have known it at the time, but I knew in later years, it was a wooden, like the wooden sleepers you get on railway lines.
Yeah.
They call them ties over here, I think. So like big wooden sleepers across like a tributary to a river. And I was in a pushchair, and I had a red plastic Land Rover, which I dropped into the river, stream, like a tiny stream, and it just gushed off at speed, And that was my earliest memory. And I learnt in later years where that was. That was on an old gunpowder works, which I mentioned in my book, because I was raised on a gunpowder works built in 1626 or something, which was obviously by that time, 1960. It had been closed for 40 plus years. So, but we lived on the site. But that was a haunted site as well. So,
yeah, I'm really interested in this idea of where inspiration comes from, or the muse, they used to call it, didn't they, in ancient Greece and Rome?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like I said before, the imagination, and you said it, in fact, the imagination creates everything.
It does.
Without the imagination, nothing man-made, whether
Absolutely
it be a physical object or a sculpture or a piece of music, nothing would exist without this sort of precognition of imagination. And where does that spark come from? Have you got any sort of theories about that, where it does come from, where it originates?
It's, oh my God, it's just it's such a big mind blower, isn't it? It's I don't know even know where to start with it. When I was trying to describe for my sort of blurb for the podcast and so on, I was trying to explain what my angle was, why it was maybe different to other people's paranormal. It's not a standard paranormal podcast, and it's not an arts podcast as such. It's like somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I try to explain this place where we get these ideas from. And I thought, well, how can I explain it? Because it's not something we can see. It's not something we can even prove exists, really. But we know it's there. But where is it? We don't know. Is it alongside us? Is it all around us? Are these ideas being planted there by other intelligences? Are we working as a team? Are we the front person of a team? Maybe there's like guardian angels or whatever you want to call them. Maybe it's like when you're writing. I mean, if you write, I've as you know, I write. And sometimes I just be sat there and I'm in the zone. I literally get in the zone, and hours will pass and I won't even notice it because I'm just in that place. And when I read back what I've written, I don't really recognize some of it. It's
it came from somewhere else.
Yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And actually that works as well when you write something. and you go back to it, your own book, maybe after a year or so, and I find myself thinking, this guy's quite good. I don't know who he is, but he's all right. He's really good. It sounds really cocky, and occasionally I'll stun myself. In fact, I have to say, I'll say publicly, that line you came up with on the podcast blurb.
Oh, I write really good YouTube show notes.
Yeah,
That's
love
my writing.
Yeah, the line about the inspiration. I can't see it in front of me now, but
the origin of inspiration.
Yeah, I thought, wow, that's just like, there's just a nice sort of feel to that. And I'd never really, I sort of thought about it, but not in those words, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, and I thought, yeah, that's brilliant. You should be a writer.
Maybe one day.
Yeah.
But I mean, this doesn't just apply to writing. It seems to me it applies to every sort of creative endeavor, whether you write words or music, or you're an artist in another. Even like we're in the digital age now, digital artists, people who can take some software and create a work of art out of software. It's still the same. It seems like it's still the same mechanism that's happening. Yeah. It's just the medium that changes.
And I think it was either Matt or Ben said earlier about the hive mind. So some of these ideas, that's another thing. Sometimes you can have an idea for an invention, for example, and you might have just got this idea, you just plucked it out of the air, it just came to you one day. I've had sort of small versions of this happen, and then you find someone else has already done it, and they've only just done it. It's like it was out there, and they haven't been looking at your stuff online, or you had no contact with them. They had no way of stealing your ideas, but it's like it's out there. This muse or whatever, it's out there, and you just have to tune into it.
Right. So I think
everything's out there.
The idea is ready to be plucked. It's just who tunes in first and manifests it.
Yeah. And also, I mean, this is why it's such a difficult thing to express, because like every day, literally every day, like I believe we are all co-creating this world we're in, whether it's a matrix or, some sort of program. We co-create it, I think, and we can make it go any way we want it. But if you can imagine like a shoal of fish, that's how I see it, and they're sort of heading in one direction, and then some of them start, or some birds, when they communicate in the sky, like swallows in a flock, the way they swoop around together. So we could be acting, it only takes a few strong minds, leaders,
at the front,
minds, who sort of get other people interested in something and doing something. So like with this whole, without going into that, because that's depressing, but this whole situation we found ourselves in the last couple of years, the only way we're ever going to get out of that and get away from the digital hell, which we could be headed for, is for some people, these leader types, to actually be loud about encouraging people to go another way. Like recently with the money situation, where if more people use hard currency money, like change, then we get to keep our change, which gives us more sort of privacy and so
freedom.
Yeah. So and people were putting that out there a lot on social media, and I agree with it. It's a good idea. And supposedly over the last month or so, more people have been using cash. So what I'm saying is, using that as an example, a few people in this hive mind or whatever can sort of influence others to go in a certain direction. So the whole life cycle, the whole pattern that we're following, there's nothing's a foregone conclusion. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
We can co-create a better future just by doing the right thing and helping each other and all the rest of it,
Right, yeah, I get you. The temptation is to throw your hands in the air and say it's inevitable that we're going to end up with central bank digital currencies, and you'll be enslaved, basically.
Yeah.
It's like with what was it with Spain? Was it last week, where they've put a limit on thermostats, haven't they? At
27 degrees.
27 degrees, right. Yeah. for your you can't be any cooler than that. That's your limit. And the best part is that all these people are getting hives and nests. They'll be able to just change it through the internet. They'll be able to limit what your heating can go to through the internet for convenience.
And they'll sort of punish you for eating too much chocolate or whatever it is. They'll know what you're buying. They'll know what you're using, and they'll sort of limit other things like transport. You can't come on a train. We
already have them. The carbon credit cards. I think is it Sweden? Yeah. One of the Nordics has rolled one out now, and you can. Yeah. It'll calculate your carbon score based on your purchases.
Yeah.
And as soon you'll be taxed on it.
It's for our own good.
Yeah. It's like the hypocrisy of these people, though, that are telling us this.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. The guys who run the show, we're the plebs Urbanus. They don't give a shit about us.
We don't.
They can afford to pay the taxes, the carbon taxes, mainly because they don't pay any other taxes. Because income tax is for mugs like us four. Yeah. Well, we pay income tax. Once you get to a certain level, you pay zero tax. In fact, you get some back if you're Jeff Bezos.
That's right.
You get a tax credit. You got 1 year, 1,600 quid tax credit. It's a joke.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And I try not to think too much about all this stuff because it'll just get you down.
Let's go back to the shoals of fish and then the No, but you raised an interesting point, and you brought the two analogies of the shoals of fish and the birds, because when you watch them, when they move like that, it almost looks telepathic.
It is. I think it is,
Is it telepathic, or is that just a heightened sensory system they have?
Weird. It gets a lot weirder than that. I was listening to, I wish I could remember his name. I was listening to Delingpod, I think it was. And he was, the Delingpod.
James Delingpod,
James, and he was talking to some guy, I wish I could remember his name. And he was talking about how the whole, so in his case, he was talking about when he was a lad and he had to go fishing, sea fishing. He was invited along. He was only like 7 or 8 or something. And he was invited along on a boat with a glass bottom. And he didn't want to, he obviously wasn't like a rough and ready, tough sort of lad. He didn't want to put maggots on the hook or whatever. And I must admit, I had some sympathy with him because I was that lad for a while. And anyway, they were on the boat. And he said he didn't really want to go. And he had a few mates there and bigger brothers and dad and so on. And he said they could see all the fish coming underneath them, and they each, say there were 4 lines in there with their hook on. They could see each hook, and he was desperate to, one, not tell them how scared he was. He didn't want to sort of lose face, but he didn't know what to do because he was scared that he would catch a fish and then have to take it off, and he didn't want to touch it. So he, as I say, didn't want to admit it. So basically, he prayed to Jesus or something, right? And he said, "Please don't let me catch a fish. I just don't want to catch a fish or whatever."
5,000 fish turned up.
Yeah. Well, no. He said the story is very weird. He said every other hook was absolutely swimming, and he had the same bait on. Every other hook was busy, really busy, and his father noticed it. And he didn't say to his dad, I just prayed to Jesus or whatever. So his dad was trying to figure it out, and the other lads noticed it. So they swapped rods, right? And whichever rod he used, he didn't get any fish anywhere near it. Isn't that weird? And it's like, well, what the hell was that about? And then he was talking about how the programming. So you're talking about like this matrix idea that we're all in a big program. Right. And he was suggesting that certain species and certain shrubs and trees and
mycelium,
everything, we are pre-programmed to do a certain job. And I don't know, it blows my mind just thinking about this stuff, but he thinks that some fish, he was a scientific guy as well. This wasn't some weird guy just coming up with ideas. He was, I forget his name, but he was a scientist, and he thinks that some species, although they don't know why they're doing it, it's a bit like bees. They'll go and collect the pollen, won't they, and then go back. They probably don't. We don't have conversations about it, and discuss the deeper things of life. They just do it because it's programmed into them to do it.
Yeah.
And so they're actually fulfilling a role, and they're sacrificing themselves. So the fish were sacrificing themselves for the greater good, which I don't like that term at all because it ties into that whole thing we just talked about.
Yeah.
Like, do it for granny and all that bullshit, frankly. But the idea is nice, but it's rubbish. It's not real. But so I just fascinated by that whole idea. And if you've ever read any of David Icke's books, he talked about this stuff like 20, 30 years ago. And now the guys are coming out, scientists are coming out now saying this stuff out loud, and people are taking them seriously because they're scientists.
Yeah.
He was saying the same thing 20, 30 years ago, and they go, "Oh, you're mad."
It's kind of reminiscent of Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance theory as well.
Yes, yeah.
That there is some sort of, I don't know, intangible communication between the same species, even though they could be separated by a continent. And he seemed to have, he did these experiments on rats, and you can put the rat through the maze, and then a rat on the other side of the world can find the maze quicker because the first mouse has found the exit. What is wild?
Yes, so that information has gone from, across the distance of time and not time, distance, which suggests there's no separation between anything.
Well, that makes sense to me because we aren't separated at all.
No, what's that thing about, we're somebody dreaming ourselves or something? So, there's I don't know off the top of my head.
Don't know
I just find all that stuff mind-blowing.
Well, it's kind of like chaos theory, isn't it? And the flapping of the butterfly's wings causing a hurricane on the other side of the world. Cause and effect.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to, not that I've read it, but I've read bits and pieces. If you go back to the Bible, and they talk about, one of the lines was, "In my Father's house there are many mansions," and I've often wondered if that means, if they're talking like dimensions. So, which would explain. I mean, if you think about, people see UFOs, for example, and they see them and they say, "Oh, they just suddenly appeared." They went, they were visible for a while, and then they just disappeared. And people assume that is just like a sudden burst of speed that's so quick we can't see it. But what if it's just popped in from outside and it's popping out again? So it's not, you are seeing it when it's here, but it's popped in and popped out because it's popped in from like the other side of the curtain, another dimension.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how many other dimensions are there? Are they infinite? Is there a set number? Is it maths? Is it down to maths? Is a set
Well, I mean,
ratio?
I'm sure I've said it before, but if you're interested in extra dimensionals, the thing to read is P.D. Uspensky's New Model of the Universe. And I think you can buy the chapter just on the fourth dimension separately on Amazon for a few quid. But he does such a good job of explaining. I can't do it. I'd butcher it. But he does a really good job of explaining how we would perceive things in a fourth dimension and how they would perceive us. But he starts at the first dimension, a line.
I think you told me this before. Yeah, they showed the drawings and tried from your perspective of it. Is that right?
Kind of, yeah.
So there's a line. There's a line in the first.
So one dimension is just a line. It's 2 points connected, and then the second dimension is a plane, and then the third dimension is three.
So
it's a cube
or something.
It's a cube, but it's how you like. If you were looking at something from the second dimension, you would just see the plane. But someone looking from the second dimension to the third, they only see the front face, so it looks like a plane. But it's not.
Yeah.
We're three-dimensional beings. But if you're living in 2 dimensions, when you look at us, we just look like a plane, like a cartoon, like The Simpsons.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell. But then he takes it to the 4th dimension, and that really like blows your mind what we could be dealing with.
So get on that point then. I think I came across that guy Uspensky. Is OEU something like that. It was in Colin Wilson's book on the occult. I think I read that many years ago. I'll have to try and read that again.
That's right.
But if you think about hauntings and such like, and as I say, UFOs as well, it all sort of makes sense if you think of it in terms of like different realities and so on. And it's like they can probably, and the other thing I'm thinking is frequency. So we're like maybe we're playing on a certain frequency, and they're playing on another frequency. So it's like different speeds and so on. I mean, I've seen plenty of videos where I saw one recently where there's some weird, there's a jet at a Florida air show going across the ocean, and there's people on the beach, and you clearly see this little disc type thing coming out of the sea. And people could say, oh, it's CGI, and maybe it is, who knows? But it traveled so fast, you had to slow it right down to see this thing. And I think it's just the difference in the speed. So maybe they're broadcasting on a different frequency and so on to us, but every now and again there's like glitches where we see stuff that we shouldn't see, maybe because we're not meant to see, and they're not. And maybe the dimensions above us, whether are able to step into ours, at will almost, and just have a look round.
That's a huge thing. The frequency question. This has been known for thousands of years. Pythagoras, the music of the spheres, he talked about frequency. That's how he described music. And then looking at the modern day, if you look at cymatics, where they'll throw iron filings on this thing and play certain frequencies, and the iron filings will assume certain sacred geometrical patterns depending on the frequency wave, depending what number of hertz sound you put through the medium that the iron filings are on.
Yeah, that also works with water. I had a friend who he sadly died back about 8-9 years ago now, and he was into all this stuff. He taught me a lot of stuff really, but he had a jar of water on a mantelpiece above his sink, and he'd written love on one of them and hate on the other one.
Wow.
And where I'm going with this, but he claimed he never touched these, and I don't think he did, but the love one stayed sort of pure and the other one was like manky, so sort of yellow and horrible. I mean, he was probably putting stuff in there when I wasn't looking, who knows, but I have heard that there have been proper lab experiments on that. Wow. And just the word itself, the sound of the word, or just written down. I mean, that's what blows my mind. I mean, you can understand audio may be affecting something, but just the intention, it's the intention, isn't it?
That's it. That's the key thing. It's not in that case, it's not the frequency of the sound, it's the intention that counts. Yeah. It's like, I mean, I remember Prince Charles going on about talking to his plants, and he swore that. I mean, I'm not a fan of Prince Charles. I think he's probably a wrong un, but he
was right. He was right about that, wasn't he?
Seems to be. I don't know.
Well, supposedly now I'm thinking back to this guy that I heard on this. I must try and find it again. That's right. He set up an experiment to do with plants and to see whether they feel pain. And he didn't want to affect it in any way. So he basically wanted this experiment to happen at a time when he wasn't around to affect it. So he set up this contraption which sent boiling water and just splashed it over this plant, right? Like a little, like a cranny type thing with hot water. It boiled it up and it went psh, like that all over it. But he didn't want it to sort of be random, so he set it for like 3 o'clock in the morning. And at 3 o'clock, and he had a buzzer to say when this thing. It was just I think it just went randomly off. But anyway, there was he had these, like a little needle with a graph showing changes in the structure of his plant or whatever. And at 3 o'clock, when this water splashed it, there wasn't an audio of it screaming, but there was some sort of reference to it, which makes me think of a Day of the Triffids. John Wyndham, yeah. But and actually that made me feel really bad because I was a gardener for quite a few years, had my own business, and I used to think about all the weeds I used to pull out, and I had not a second thought about it, and and you think you take a limb off a tree, who knows?
I don't know. I wonder if I think that I'm starting to get the feeling that pretty much everything is conscious.
Yes,
but there's different degrees.
Yeah,
there's different degrees of conscious, and how you measure that is probably the sticky thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't worry too much about your
my gardening crimes.
Crimes against gardening.
Crimes against botany.
Oh man.
Yeah,
well,
actually, I did. I actually got told off once when I first started gardening. This is funny. I worked. I gave up my builder's merchants, and I was a rep, and I just had enough of that sort of commercial lifestyle of like company car and suit and tie and all that. So I set up a gardening business in Cornwall, and before I did it, I thought, well, I better learn a bit more. I have got green fingers, as they say, so I'm pretty good at it, really. And I got that through the family. So I sort of had a head start, but I needed to learn a bit more. So I worked for a local company as part of a gang that went out in these trucks with the mowers on the back, and I did all that stuff. So on my first day or second day, we went to this old rambling mansion in North Cornwall somewhere. And basically I was told, I'll just weed this path and tidy it up a bit. I was with one other guy. And I saw these little weedy type flowers. Well, they look like weeds to me, between this paving stones, And I thought, I'm a bit of a tidy freak, and I didn't like the look of them, so I thought they're coming up. So I ripped them all out, and big mistake. So the lady of the house comes out. She's about sort of 65. Very, very angry when she suddenly noticed that they were like a flower that let out a scent when you walked on them, which she loved, because I didn't know that, So basically she was absolutely livid, absolutely livid. So, but it's like, it's not a mistake you'll make a second time. But the funny thing about that was she was the sister of Sir John Knott.
Who's
Do you remember
that?
Sir John Knott? He was a Tory minister, and he was the one who he was giving an interview on the BBC about the Falkland Islands or something. So it goes back to the 80s, and they were giving him a hard time, and he just suddenly got up. He said, "I'm not gonna deal with this. How dare you speak to me like that?" And he just ripped his mic off and stormed out.
Wow.
And you can still find it on YouTube, probably. Yeah. But it was his sister. Right. And I just thought, yeah, sweet justice, really. Tory minister,
Take that.
Yeah. I fucked your sister over. Yeah. Sorry. Can you edit that out?
No, it's live. Sorry. Well, we're not bothered about fucking over Tories here.
No.
But the funny thing about that was the guy I was with is a really nice guy. He was sort of just training me for the day, sort of thing. And he apologized. I apologized. And off she went eventually. Then she came back and she started again. And he said, "Look, I'm sorry. Mark's sorry." Off she went again. I'm just putting this very concise, but this went on. And about the fourth time she came out, I'm not going to say what he told her to do, but We didn't work for her again.
Do you think she was after money? Was she after money off?
Possibly.
I would have thought
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
I think that's what she was looking for.
Yeah, maybe.
You know what people with money are like.
Yeah.
Do you?
But,
Sorry,
yeah. Go on.
I was just going to say we're an equal opportunities slayer of
Hater.
politicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too, definitely.
I think they can all
fact,
get in the sea.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I feel more let down by the Labour lot than I do because like the Tories, you expect them to screw you over, don't you?
Yeah.
It's what they've always done. It's like, well, that's what they do. Yeah, give them a break. That's what they do. But the other lot, it's in the name, isn't it? They call them the opposition, but they're not.
The Labour Party.
Yeah, they were worse. They were
They're
far
supposed to
worse
represent
than the
Labour.
government. Yeah, they wanted to do everything harder, didn't they? Give them more lockdowns. Yeah, give them bigger social distances. You know, they just wanted to do everything far worse.
Yeah.
And I've got no time for them whatsoever. And they're all I should going off on a rant now, but they're all like the people who sort of support them. They sort of tell poor people what they should think.
Oh yeah, because they're poorly
they don't live that life
educated.
themselves.
They're poorly educated, you see. So we have to save them from making poor decisions like Brexit because they're so poorly educated.
And yeah, but they all live in these posh houses, and they've got comfortable salaries.
Yeah,
They've got
champagne
nice, easy
socialists.
lives. Yeah, and it's like I mean, if you go back 20, 30 years, it wasn't quite so bad, was it?
Well,
I could sort of get behind them then.
I guess Tony Blair changed the game, didn't he, with New Labour?
I often think he was planted. I think he was like, I think he was one of the other lot. Yeah. I think he was put there to pretend he was like a socialist or whatever. And yeah.
I mean, he spent a lot of
He
money.
sold us out,
You can't argue with the amount. You know, he spent a lot of money on education. I remember Shoe Start programs. I worked on them, building them.
All closed.
Yeah, because guess what? The government doesn't have any money. It's our money that they take from us and they decide to spend, you know.
We distribute it,
Yeah, redistribution of wealth, mainly to the mates.
Well, it's got so bad now, it's like beyond a joke, isn't it? It's
Well,
unbelievable.
I mean, we might, if we have time, to talk about this in part 2, but with like the fuel crisis and inflation and stuff, it's looking pretty grim in the UK, and I don't think it's much better in the US either, and certainly in Western Europe as well.
Yeah, it's bleak,
I mean,
isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, France, you can say, well, they've nationalised most of their energy, so they seem to have been able to shield their population from a lot of these rising costs. But
don't they own some water companies in England? I think they used to.
yeah, and power companies,
Yeah, they
Power
supply
companies,
power,
yeah,
don't
right.
they?
E.ON, is it E.ON?
EDF.
EDF.
Ah, right.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we go down the horrible rabbit hole that is politics in 2022, let's. I think we should sign off, Mark. Is there anything you want to say?
So. I think so. Before I go off on a rant or something. Yeah.
I mean,
it's probably too late for that, but
I'll put the links in the show notes for your book. How long's the podcast stuff, do you think? I'm not going to hold you to this, but
no, we're just finishing off some artwork. I've got some really good ideas for some like simple eye-catching artwork.
so soon.
Probably about a week, 10 days.
Oh, nice.
something
Wow.
like that. I've actually got. I've met some amazing. It's just like we were saying earlier. Opportunities just crop up. It's like if you put it out there, whatever it is you want, you put it out there, it will come to you. I do believe that it will come to you. And I met a guy that I hadn't seen for a long time, a retired professor, but he's the most down to earth guy. He loves all this ufology stuff, and he was rereading all the classic UFO literature from the 70s.
Wow.
And I got chatting to him, and I said, "Well, would you like to come on and just chat about this stuff?" Because he has a really out there sort of look at things, sort of beyond what most people think about. We never did speak about the conference either, did we? We missed
Well,
that.
time is a finite
Run out
resource,
of
isn't it?
It is.
We can only do so much.
Yeah.
You'll have
Okay.
to let us know when the first episode drops, so we can
Yeah.
we can download it and let people know, because I'm looking forward to it.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And
Yeah, as I say, got some great guests lined up, some great topics. So we'll see how it goes.
yeah, well, there you are. There you are, eavesdroppers.
Okay.
Keep your eyes peeled, and we shall inform you when Cuckoo Land comes out, when it drops, as the kids say.
That's right.
Cuckoo Land's dropping in 2 weeks.
Whatever.
All right. Well, it's been nice to see you again, Mark.
Been good talking to you.
Yeah, I've drunk. It's so hot here. I've drunk at least 3 Doom bars in your honour since we started.
Very cool. Yeah, lovely.
My favourite
Lovely.
Cornish.
I haven't had one of those for a long time.
Oh,
So,
I'll have to send you some.
yeah, it's mostly Sam Adams over here.
Oh, right, that dirt. Ugh, goodness me. Well, Mark, stay on the line for 2 seconds while we play ourselves
Okay.
out. And we'll catch you guys on the flip side for part 2. All right?
See you later.
See ya. Bye.
Cheers.